And welcome back to our coverage of the Mackinac Policy Conference. I'm Christy McDonald. Joining me now are three very powerful people in the state of Michigan, and they're using their strength to work together, and I always love talking to them every time this year. Luana Simon is the president of Michigan State University and my alma mater. It's good to see you.
Thank you.
Mark Schlissel is the president of the University of Michigan. It's good to see you as well, Mark.
Nice to see you too.
And Roy Wilson, the president of Wayne State University. It's good to see you as well.
Great to be here.
I love it when we can get you all in one place and be able to talk a little bit about higher ed and the importance of that it's playing in the state of Michigan right now in a lot of various areas. So I'm going to start first with you, Luana, and say, what is it about this working together and being able to compare and then join teams together in terms of the University Research Corridor and retaining talent that we have here in the state of Michigan?
Well, this began over 10 years ago with the idea that we could compete with any place in the country if we just thought about ourselves more as a corridor and a team and not as individual institutions. It doesn't prohibit competition on individual grants or in a variety of settings, but if together we could show the people of the world that Michigan was a great place, had all the assets necessary to be the 21st century economy, we could do that through the URC. So the benchmarking report was part of that. It shows that we're very, very competitive against all those parts of the country that people think are the places for the 21st century. And then we've added these sector reports so that we can say that in particular areas that folks believe are really important, this is where Michigan stands, and because of the three members of the University Research Corridor, it's been great working with Roy and Mark, and this new report that we're talking about this time comes out of the first sector report we did a while ago on the life sciences, broadly health, and they have a chance to talk about the data and how impactful it is for Michigan.
And the primary source of talent really around here, Mark. Talk a little bit about what you found.
It's a huge source of talent. It turns out our three universities together produce more people with degrees, advanced degrees in health sciences and medicine than any cluster of universities around the country we compared ourselves to. So we're a real talent machine. We're also an engine of innovation. You know, we do the research that leads downstream to the new companies and products and interventions that improve quality of life. And then each of us is actually involved directly in providing healthcare. So we run health systems or work in communities or have hospitals, urban, suburban. So we're directly providing care for our fellow citizens while we're teaching younger people how to do medicine.
You know, Roy, the one thing that people are talking about here is retaining the talent and making sure that we have the talents available for the jobs that are here or the jobs that we may be seeing in this state or that we want to get here in the next 5 years or so. How would you say that we need to work in a different way to make sure that once they walk out with that degree from Wayne State University that they end up staying in the state of Michigan, whether it's in Detroit or someplace else, and using that talent and the degree that they earned and staying here?
You know, one thing, this doesn't directly answer your question, but one thing about a degree in one of the health-related, whether it's medical health or life sciences, is that it's pretty recession-proof. You know, so that it was one of the one areas where during the recession, jobs were still steady, it's still growing, it's a growth area. And even in the bad days when auto industry and everything else, the jobs were going down, the jobs were going up in this industry. So that's important to remember. So it does continue to attract good talent all the time. It doesn't depend on what the economy is doing at that time. In terms of retaining them here in Michigan, you know, it depends on which area you're studying, but certainly in medicine, it's very important that we give them opportunities for training outside of the medical school to be able to stay here, whether it's internships, fellowships, residencies, because data shows that where students do their internship and their residencies is likely to determine where they're going to end up being. And so it's really important that we expand those slots, that we continue to work together to provide each other students the slots in these hospitals and work together. It was with respect to the other, you know, this is a very broad area. It's not just medicine. Obviously, there's a lot of research areas that goes on. So we have to continue to just provide the opportunities for students who get their degrees to stay here in Michigan and contribute here in Michigan.
I can only imagine, Mark, that a lot of business leaders up here are talking to you about that, saying, how can we make sure that your students stay here?
Sure. So, you know, many of our students who are native Michiganders, they love it here. That's where their families are, and their tendency is to stay. To me, it's a glass half full argument rather than a glass half empty. And what I mean by that is the U of M attracts students from all around the country. So we've got students from all 50 states in our undergraduate program. And our graduate programs are national and international programs. If you don't ever come to Michigan and learn about it, your chances of settling here are probably close to zero. So if we're losing some students that come here, that's the way it goes. But the students that come here fall in love with the quality of life, the beauty of the state, hopefully an increasingly vibrant economy, a good quality of life. They'll stay, and they never would have learned about Michigan if they weren't attracted to come here to begin with by our great universities.
And what do you think?
Let me add to that a bit and go back to Roy's point about when people come for internships and residencies, they tend to want to stay and settle. We have to partner with industry, even through the worst of times, to assure that their internships and lots of experiences for our students, because when they're connected to companies, they will stay at a higher rate. And that connection sometimes becomes a little bit weak when the economy goes down, and we're those extra students that are trouble because their workforce is down and it's hard to supervise them, or they want people who are performing at a higher level than the newbie, and they're going to not support an intern. Because they feel the pressure of productivity. But I think all the research suggests that connections make a huge difference. It's our out-of-state students coming and staying. All those things matter, and you have to look at it as an ecosystem. Our job, though, is to prepare students who are good enough to go anywhere in the world and want to stay here because this is a bright future.
You know, you talked about recession-proof careers, and I think people are also looking on the horizon. It took Michigan so long to come back out, and people are saying, gosh, there could be another role along the horizon. I want to talk a little bit about the next generation of mobility and technology, and how each one of your universities is really starting to plug into making sure that Michigan is that hub, or the push to make sure that we're in the center of it all. I'm going to start with you, Roy.
Well, certainly that's being led mainly by our School of Engineering, but certainly in our business school also very involved with a lot of programs related to the new technology. I think that Michigan and Michigan State are certainly leaders in this area, national leaders, and we ride their coattails a little bit, particularly with respect to auto safety and those issues. But we're all involved in this area. It is for the next generation what the next big thing is going to be. I don't think it's going to replace life sciences and the medical sciences. I think it's very different, but I think it will be complementary too. And maybe in another 5 years we should do a sector report on what's going on in that sector. But right now, I think that the life sciences, health sciences, and medical sciences are very, very important for Michigan moving forward for a long time.
Mark, U of M's playing a big role.
We've made a huge investment in mobility, and it's been going on for 100 years. So, we started doing automotives research in the 1910s, shortly after the automobile was invented. A few years ago, shortly after I arrived, we opened up this test site called M-City. I don't know if you visited, but it's a 32-acre test site on the North Campus in Ann Arbor that's designed to test and develop connected and autonomous vehicles. So it's got sensors in roadways and facades of buildings and people with baby carriage mannequins crossing the road. And it's a shared test site. It's a public-private partnership. So MSU is involved in it, local government, state and national government, the major auto companies, the insurance companies, the technology companies, and it's an open source testing ground to work on the new and emerging technologies. As I share with you, I think if this doesn't remain in Michigan, Southeast Michigan, the creative home of innovation in the auto industry, I think our state will struggle to just stay above water, literally. We're also partners in the new American Center for Mobility at Willow Run. The state has provided a lot of funding. The old Willow Run GM factory with roads and overpasses and bridges and the like has become another larger scale testing and development facility for the next generation of mobility. And the last thing I'll say is we have an initiative on our campus in big data. And one of the components of this data science initiative is transportation data. So we're not that far away from an era where everything that moves is going to have a sensor in it. And it's going to be reporting location, trajectory, speed to sensors that are in the street, on street lamps, on buildings, and there'll be an operating system in a city that coordinates human movement the old-fashioned way with bicycles and cars and mass transit, trying to make it so we don't arrive at traffic lights at the same time, or we don't have car accidents anymore. And we're very involved in that research.
That's fascinating.
And I think our profile is very similar to Michigan's, but we made the decision to think about the campus as a test ground. And not because we have control, we have a more contiguous campus, we have control of the roadways, but also to partner with AMC and with Michigan and what they're doing, from everything from drivetrain, but we're also involved in communication arts and sciences, our gamers, other posts, in a program that's called Canvas, which is very multifaceted, and our cars are on the dock, and our kids decided that they needed to do a different kind of technology than was the standard, and they decided that they had to have a sensor that worked in snow.
There you go.
Can't develop that in Silicon Valley, right?
And so that the car that's on the dock is one of the, and it was placed 5th in the world because they sort of worried about snow. And that's the kind of creativity and exchange that's happening both in competition and in collaboration in the institutions, that because together we want to make mobility one of the hallmarks for Michigan, but we want to also make it a world of ands. And sometimes we say manufacturing or now mobility, and then we drop off something else like life sciences off the list. The state that's going to win in the future is going to be a state of ands. And a state that can celebrate food and food systems and the exports, celebrate mobility across these great universities, celebrate health and what it will mean for Michigan, both in terms of bringing dollars in, the economic impact, as well as the health, being a healthy community and attracting talent here, not just the natural resources. And URC is a place of ands as we work across all of these topics.
And it's amazing everything that's happening at all 3 of your universities, and so much we hear. We need to get kids into higher ed. We need them to walk out with a bachelor's. We need them to have that higher learning so they can get those great jobs and so they can have the higher standard of living. But people complain about the cost of higher education, that it's cost prohibitive, that these kids are coming out of college and they have tremendous amount of debt. I want each one of you to address how each one of your universities is talking to their students about being able to afford higher ed, and what you're doing in terms of lobbying maybe a little bit more funding from the state of Michigan to be able to infuse things back in.
Look, the money has to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
So we get the same number of dollars from the state at the University of Michigan that we got in 1997, no inflation adjustment,
and
1997. We're 20% larger than we were in 1997, and think of the inflation since 90. So if the public can't politically get together and say we need to invest in educating talented kids for subsequent generations, and invest that way through the government, through funding universities, then the universities have to charge the individual students for the education. And what we try to do is develop a financial aid system using both philanthropy and then in effect discounting based on a family's ability to pay in order to make the education accessible as broadly across the economy as we can.
Roy?
Yeah. So I would echo everything that was said by Mark, but also just mention that we are very, very sensitive to price increases for our students. You know, we have students from all different socioeconomic backgrounds, but a great concentration in the lower socioeconomic background. And so it's very important that we try to keep tuition down as much as possible. But the money has to come from somewhere, and there's a misperception by some that research makes money. You know, they see all these big research grants that we get, and they think that our universities are rich because of this research. Well, it's actually not, because research costs money. In order to do research, it costs universities more than they take in to do that kind of research. And so that's an important thing to remember, and we have to somehow fund that, and we do that through our internal resources, but the state has got to be more proactive in how they fund higher education and research in particular.
I'm going to give you the last word on this.
Well, if I look at the data on, national data on debt, and I look at our student bodies, our data, we're very much below the national average. We're all lumped in always with whatever is the one student who had a pretty exceptional bill or someone else. But the biggest debt is not graduating. Because then you have debt and no credentials to show for it, and we're all working very hard on that. I also think that we're working very hard together, because when we add financial aid to a budget that's constrained, it means we're reducing budgets and operations. And that's invisible to people because the total budget only grows by 2%, but in order to make everything work, you've got to reduce over here in order to support our students, which is why we've been able to keep, I think, our debt levels very, very competitive nationally.
All right. Well, keep up all the great work at these fine institutions that so many people in Michigan are very proud to have.
Yeah,
so.
Thanks so much for your ongoing interest in higher
No,
ed.
it's great to see
Thank
you.
you.
Roy Wilson, Wayne State University, Mark Schlissel from the University of Michigan, and Luanna Simon from
Good to see
Michigan
you.
State. All right. Thanks so
very
much.
Good to see you.